So Sheriff's first like real chance, the time where I felt like for the first time, I felt like Real Madrid kind of switched off defensively was like kind of just before they started to have those chances in like the 62nd minute or so, where Jan Sane, their players, is allowed to cut and Cruz lets him cut and he shoots. And that was kind of the first time I was like, they actually kind of did something offensively. Because in the first half, when they were trying to take advantage of our high line, I thought Militao and Carvajal were awesome, and Casemiro too. Really, the entire backline. But I thought they were really good, just reading those balls over the top and being quick and strong on transition defense. And so I thought, when you look at, again, this going back to this XG, which makes it look more even than it was, they started to get some chances after it was 3-0. Carlo started making subs. And you mentioned the 70% possession. I felt it was, sometimes a team has 70% possession and it doesn't really feel like they're in control. You see that quite a bit in modern football, where like if it's a really, really organized, elite low block that knows what they're doing, they know how to hit their rotations, they know how to stay compact, they can almost take the control despite having 30% of the ball. But I felt like in this particular game, Real Madrid were in control. I didn't feel like at any point Sheriff were kind of making us that uncomfortable. I will say I was worried about health. I was worried that somebody would just get hurt real bad, because you saw some of the lunges, and I mean, it's part of their identity. Look, if I was Sheriff and I was playing against Real Madrid, I would probably consider playing a little bit rough as well. I'm not going to hold it against them necessarily. But, I did feel like they were so physical, and they were pretty good at limiting our movement inside the box for the most part. I think that's part of the reason why Vinicius had some trouble finding space. But I just wanted to get out of there like unscathed from a physical standpoint. And so I'm glad we got to that. And I think part of the benefit of going up 2-0, starting from a deflected free kick from Alba, was that, and the one right, like 1 second before halftime from the Cruz banger, it was great to go into halftime at 2-0, because it started to make you think, okay, this is a little bit closer now to making some wholesale changes, rest some players. The schedule upcoming is insane. So I'm just kind of glad we got out of there relatively alive. And I think, judging by what Carlo said, Alaba is going to be okay for this weekend, I think.
I was surprised that Carlo didn't go more aggressive with some of the rotations here today. I mean, I understand with Fede still out, certain options are limited. You're going to have to play two of Kroos, Modric, Casemiro, but I don't know why Camavinga couldn't have featured in the starting 11 versus this one. I know there's a bit of a sense that we have to take this opponent seriously after losing last time, but it would truly be crazy if we drop points to them twice. I mean, I think you could probably stick Camavinga in there without too much problem, see kind of how it goes, probably give Asensio another start and play Rodrigo off the left. I'm kind of reaching the point where I'm starting to wonder, like, when does Vinicius get his rest? I mean, he was called up to international duty, so that was not an opportunity for him. It took him a while to get going last match. I mean, the first half it wasn't that sharp from him. It was probably one of the worst performances he'd had up until that point. And then
we discussed, Matt and I discussed your 180 turn on Vinicius at halftime after the Granada game.
That's what you do, right? You see what happens in one portion of the game. You assess it how it is, and then if it changes, you say it changes in the second half. But, I mean, it was weird. It looked like he got more energy in the second half, but I mean, he's a kid. Obviously, we've lessened his defensive load so he can go longer, but I do start to wonder when exactly we think about resting him. I'm not trying to say we hit the panic button already. I've had a couple people already ask me, is like, this is the 14-15 season all over again? I think we'll have to see a lot more before we go on and say that, because it's not like Carlo wasn't rotating and trying to find what he wanted. Like, towards the beginning of the season, we saw a lot of different lineups, a lot of different looks. But, I mean, he kind of made that comment beforehand, I think, where he's like, I'm not thinking about rotation for this one. I think it's said something to the effect of it's overstated sometimes. I just got to pick my strongest 11. I think it was kind of a sense for him that he's finally figured out the look he wants out on the field. He's found what he said in the past is his equilibrio. and he just kind of wants to get them on a roll. But also given that Sheriff were probably going to be a bit more physical, which they were defensively, especially in the first half, I was a bit surprised by that. And I mean, most of the starters would have had to been out there. It's not like we had the bench to just rotate a ton of them. But I thought a couple key people probably could have been put off that weren't, and I was a little surprised by that. And then also kind of surprised that right after halftime he didn't just go ahead and make his subs, but he started at the 60th minute, and there were quite a few of them. So I guess it is what it is. We'll have to see what things will look like going forward. And I think it'll just be interesting to monitor as best we can with our eyes, like what Vinicius's energy levels look like. And I think it's gone underrated that Benzema also has kind of floated through the last month of football or so, and maybe a little bit beyond that, because there's international break in between there, like looking kind of off for portions of a game after he started the season the way he did. So I think we got to keep an eye on all of that and figure out how it's possible to rest them if we can. You'd think it'd be games like this, but in this specific moment, it looks like Carlo was in a different frame of mind.
Well, Benzema floating, and to an extent, Vinicius not to the same extent, but just given the fact that he was a little bit cooler today. That first half against Granada, again, as you said, it took him time. In the second half, he was amazing. The fact that we're kind of seeing these floating performances, as you put it, and they're still contributing offensively and still getting to their spots and still scoring and still assisting is a really good sign to me. But the point about rotations is really interesting because I thought the first thing, and I think a lot of people, just based on the social media dialogue and Twitter and stuff, I think a lot of people were just waiting for the usual quote-unquote elderly players in the squad, such as Modric, such as Benzema, those guys, that we could give them rest first. That they're like, in this upcoming stretch, we would love to have a healthy Modric, a healthy Benzema. And given the fact that they're a little bit older and they're playing so much and they barely gotten really rest in just consistently over the years, unless it's been a forced injury or something. Modric maybe a little bit more so. He's been playing a little less, but I thought we were all looking at players like those guys to come up first. And it's interesting that Carlo made his first three subs were all on the back line, and Modric and Benzema both stayed and played the full 90. And it was also interesting that Camavinga didn't come in over Blanco, which I'm not necessarily in huge disagreement with. I think Blanco's a really good player. Maybe, I don't know, Carlo was... I'm sure he had his whatever reason he had. But what I started to think was, well, part of the reason that he's probably taking the defenders off first is because it's our most thin position. If anything happens to Mendy, Carvajal, Alaba, Militao, the drop-off from those four, especially this season, to Nacho or Lucas Vazquez, or if you want to really scrape it, Vallejo, is pretty steep, especially when you start to factor in the upcoming opponents. So I started to understand that, because at least for Cruz, Casemiro, and Modric, as great as they are, we have everyone from Camavinga to Blanco to Isco. Maybe Carlo can throw in Asensio. They're not ideal. I'm just saying that these are all the options. So I thought that's what it was. But I will say it's really interesting and possibly even refreshing to I don't know if you saw it, Carlo actually explained every single sub, 1 to 5, why he did it. I don't know if you saw that, but it's been moments like this season that I've started to really appreciate press conferences again. We're actually getting information, like valuable information that we just weren't getting last year because Zidane hated press conferences so much. One-line answers and just really short and just wanting to get out of there. And I understand why Zizou had to be like that. I understand his frustration. I understand his frustration at the questions, the journalists. I sympathize with it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach necessarily. I'm just saying it's kind of nice to just have information. So here's the quote about his substitution. So starting with the Mendy sub, quote, I changed Mendy because he had picked up a yellow. I changed Carvajal because he had a long-term injury, and I changed Alaba because of his injury tonight. So then I had 2 substitutions left, and I used one of those to take off Casemiro because he was one booking away from suspension, and the other to take off Rodrigo, who had also just come back from injury. Having him on all the way to the end could have been dangerous. With the others, they were fine. We don't play until Sunday night, and they have time to recover well. End quote. So I thought that was just kind of cool that he wanted, he explained all those subs. It helps us also as analysts to like minimize the guesswork. He also said, I don't know if you remember when him and Casemiro were just kind of talking on the sidelines, Casemiro was smiling. Ancelotti said that in that moment, Casemiro was literally telling him, hey, I'm going to get suspended if you don't take me off, basically. And Carlo was like, okay. And he said, I waited and then I took him off to avoid that suspension coming for the match against Inter. So I thought it's just really cool to hear these things post-game.
Yeah, it does. It takes out the guesswork, and we don't have to wonder why he didn't take the forward options off. It kind of seemed like his hand was forced a lot. I guess the one interesting one would be why Camavinga wasn't on, but I don't know if there's need to speculate about that. We'll just kind of have to see how things develop with him. He's really, really young, and it's going to take a lot of time with him. Well, maybe other people did, especially when he had those like scoring appearances off the bench, but I certainly didn't expect this to be an instant, impact plug-in guy over a season. Camavinga's one for the next couple of years, and we'll just have to take it slowly and see what happens with him. But I'll still say that I think he could have started today, and it would have been fine.
Who stood out to you from Real Madrid in this game? Someone that like really caught your eye, you think was like the standout?